Hello, good evening, welcome. My name is Naveen Kishore. I'm the publisher at Seagull Books and the proud publisher of our dear friend and author, Peter Pannke. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much and welcome. Peter will be in conversation with Sandip Roy, who again is, eventually going to be soon a Seagull author. That he's a writer, podcaster, columnist, journalist, amongst many other things. And they are both going to be in conversation. I just wanted to say a few things about Peter before handing it over to Sandip. And Peter's a scholar, he's a traveler, a dreamer, vocalist, and master storyteller. Peter has many lives, fascinating, all of them, and inspiring. He traverses across borders of thought, often challenging the idea of it, drawn to India by the voices of the Tagore brothers. His seeker-learner self made him unearth, discover the spiritual practice that Dhrupad is, almost a vanishing art. Through him, in this wonderful book, Singers Die Twice, which we have published, we see here dream the language of artists, the rigor, the riyaz, the dailiness of practice of being human, the unraveling of the artistry of practicing a life in music. Thank you, Peter. And in the true spirit of Guru Shishya tradition, I shall retreat into my Shishya mode and hand it to Sandip. Welcome, Sandip. All yours.
Thank you so much, Naveen. And Peter Pannke, welcome virtually to Kolkata. I wanted to, your book, your wonderful book, Singers Die Twice, starts with this line: before anything else, India is a smell. And before we go to sound, I thought I'd ask you, sitting far away in Germany, if I asked you to summon up what India smells like, what would it be? How would you describe it?
I'm on, right? You can hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. I've been trying to give the gist of it when opening the book, because I feel that, smell is something which is reaching us at the deepest level in the brainstem. And there really is a particular smell. It's hard to describe it, but some places really have a smell. And I'm at a lack of words actually it's really something. In the book I've been explaining that this is something which you can make out only at the first moment of encounter. As soon as you are there, as soon as you have imbibed the atmosphere, you're part of the scene. You cannot make it out anymore. So it's something, if you want to know what it is, I think best is if you ask yourself of your experiences of smell, what a place has been saying to you. And so this is not something which you can put in 2 or 3 sentences.
I agree.
I've been writing a whole book about that to give the answer, and I think the best thing would be to read the book.
It's true. I mean, every time I go abroad and you step out of the airplane into, say, Kolkata air, you do smell it. It smells different. The warm moistness of the air has a smell.
Yes,
the grass has a smell. The musty carpet in the airport has a smell. Everything has a certain smell. But in terms of sound, I know that years ago for the Festival of India in Germany, you did a soundscape called Hear India. And
Right.
if you were to do a sound installation of a village like Amta, the village in Bihar your guru was from, this little village in the middle of nowhere, what are the sounds that you think you would include in such an installation?
Well, I've been doing that. I've recording practically wherever, in the first years when I was in India in the 70s and 80s, I was recording whatever wherever I was, you know. So I had hundreds of hours of tapes of all kinds of sounds, and I have been doing a portrait of a sound portrait of a village which was a village of the Santals, you know. I've been to the what was the name of that? I've been to a Santal village, and I've been trying to explore the philosophy of sound, which the Santals have, where it becomes particularly important from which direction a sound would be coming. Would it be coming from the, you know, from the time of the sunrise, from the side of the sunrise or sunset, and a rooster crowing, you know, at noon from a particular direction would have a very different meaning than it would be crying in the evening or something like that. So, so it's a way of orienting yourself. And in Amta, you know, I mean, Amta is really a small, really a village, and I think. Yes, in Amta, of course, the outstanding sound of Amta is the sound of Dhrupad.
Of course.
You know, which it's a you know, this is a signal which you won't get in many other villages.
Yeah. Right, you'll hear the crickets chirping in the other villages, but maybe not the sound of the
Of course, yeah. You hear the crickets, and most probably you hear dogs, you know. You can hear dogs virtually all over India.
Cows,
and you hear
dogs.
Humans, you know, you hear humans, you hear birds, you know.
Temple bells, bicycles.
Yes, and you hear the sound of the wind in the trees, you know. In the bamboo trees, or in the, you know, I mean, there's, if we talk about it for half an hour, I could give you the whole story. And I've been actually writing poems about sounds. And I just remember a poem which I wrote. I lived in a cave behind old Jageshwara. You're aware of Jageshwara? It's behind Almora. It's
yeah.
There's a very old temple there, and I spent time there, and I lived in a couple of caves because I wanted to have the feeling, you know, how it feels to live in a cage. Yes, and not in a cage.
Not a cage. Cave.
It was not quite a cage. It was really a cave, and this poem was called "Listen with a Lizard" because I was putting myself into the position of a lizard who is really listening around what's happening here. And this is a poem I wrote in English, actually. I started out as a poet. I was a published poet when I was 14 years old.
Oh, okay.
And I was published in literary journals, and then Rowohlt, the German big publisher, published my poems when I was about 19 or 18, introduced by Peter Rühmkorff, famous German poet. But then I switched over from writing to music, and an important aspect of that was really my when I started to listen to Indian music. That really changed my mind. And at that time, I thought I would be coming back to writing when I really would have something to say, which I estimated would be on the other side of 60. And I kept that promise, you know. I started to publish book when I was, when I had crossed 60, and I'm just at the final stages of my first novel, which I started to write 12 years ago, or more than 12 years ago, and which is not set in India, but is set in Pakistan.
Is it also about music?
It is, of course, it's not without music, but it's about, I mean, that very interesting things happened there to me when I was there. Actually, when I had made up my mind to go to India, I decided, or rather not even decided, it was quite obvious that I would go overland. You know, I was traveling on the hippie trail, and I started out in '69, and I spent a couple of months playing with street musicians in Turkey. Then I hitchhiked all along the Persian Gulf. I was a couple of months in Iran. And then eventually I got to Pakistan, and I sort of got stuck in Pakistan. I lived for half a year at a Sufi shrine in Sindh, and then I spent another 3 months in jail in Quetta.
Jail?
And yes, and I had a...
Wait. Why were you in jail?
Oh, Sandip, this is, you know...
You say that is like the most natural thing. Oh, I spent a few months at the Sufi shrine and a few months in jail. Like, that's what everyone does.
It's... well, what happened is that I was traveling. I lived in Sindh, and it became summer, and it was very, 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 very hot. And so I got together with a friend of mine, with a Malang, with a Darwish, and we went to the mountains. So eventually, we were in that area between Quetta and Afghanistan, you know, on the way to near, there's a place called Ziyarat. I don't know if you're aware of that. And just by unknowingly, we trespassed on some military area. And I was totally unaware that that an uprising was going on in Balochistan at that time. You know, there has been, you know,
there was a lot of trouble in Balochistan.
Balochistan is still going on, the same thing, but it was at that time, that must have been 1970. It was there was a lot of activity, so we trespassed some military area, and we were caught. We spent a night in the torture camp of the Pakistani army. I saw how they tortured my friend, who was like my best friend at that time. And then after that, we were just dumped in jail in Quetta, and not knowing if we ever would get out of that again, because it was like, you know, it was like you could easily disappear. But on the other hand, it was a very educative time for me. I really improved my knowledge of Urdu, and also I completed my fakir education, you know, because when I was living with the Malangs and the fakirs, I was very young. I was just at the beginning of 20, you know, and so I was introduced into the law and etiquette of the Sufis and Malangs and dervishes, and you know, how to speak, how to behave, you know, how you go about that. And so I was like a free, I saw myself as a free roaming spirit, you know, as a fakir. And then as soon as I was in jail, all this was over. It was a very different angle to look at society. And so this was a time when my whole education was completed or complemented on a very different level. And I've been, of course, some of that was quite shocking. And I've been really all my life I wanted to write about that, because these are some experiences very few people have. So I wanted to share that. And since it's a long story, I couldn't tell it just in a conversation. And so, which meant that I had to write a book about it. And that took me really many years, because it goes like to the depth of existence.
And you decided, Peter, to write it as a novel rather than as a memoir.
Yes. I'm just trying to think why I did that. I think the reason is that I spent many years in Pakistan, you know. Actually, after this experience, I had to go back to, eventually I had to go back to Germany. I couldn't go on. I was without money. I was without a passport. I was pretty much, you know, really, I was, at least I had a shirt and a pants.
Yeah,
Hardly any shoes, you know, but I had an instrument. So I was playing my way back to Germany through the bazaars of Iran and Turkey and so on, because I've been a street musician.
So at that time, what musical instrument were you playing?
I had my music actually goes back to when I was a baby in the cradle. My father and my mother, they used to sing for me. You know, I was maybe 1, 2, 3 years old, and my father had a lute. You know, he had been part of a movement in Germany, which is called the Wandervögel. You know, young people trying to escape from the cities and going to the forests and singing songs, playing music. Actually, I'm describing all that in the books, in the book Singers Die Twice, because this is, that's really which started my interest, or my, not just interest, my fascination with music. So, and I inherited this lute from my father, and then when I was a teenager, the town I was growing up in was an American soldiers camp, and these guys are used in the evening to go to the pubs, and you know, black Americans playing blues, folk blues, and I was hanging out with them, and I got into into blues and you know, that kind of thing. And when I started to listen to Indian music, so the first musician I heard was Ali Akbar Khan, the first LP, you know, which was called the 30-minute raga, because it was unheard of that a piece of music could last more than 5 minutes or so. So they called this the 30-minute raga. It was Rag Marwa. And this I found really fascinating. So I wanted, and also the first Dhrupad LPs came out. And so I really wanted to find out how they do that, you know, how could human beings produce these kinds of sounds? Because this was, at that time, it was like unheard of. And so in Turkey, I joined up with a band of street musicians, and they gave me an instrument to play, which looked like a tea kettle, you know, it's a metal thing, and it's called a chumbish, they call it. And then eventually I got to Iran, and I was in Tabriz, I was in Tehran. Then I went south because I wanted to have a look at the Gulf. And in Shiraz, in an antique shop in Shiraz, which was run by an old Jew at that time, I've discovered amongst many old things, I discovered an instrument which is called the setar, Iranian setar. You know, se in Persian means three, and tar, of course, means strings. So it's a 3-string, actually it's 4 strings because one is doubled, but this is like the grandmother of the Indian setar, you know. The C is 30, of course. So the significance, the meaning of sitar is actually 30 strings. And but I love that instrument because it's so easy to carry. I always wanted to have instruments which I just could take in my hand and just take it anywhere. And I still have that instrument. I'm playing it since now, if we count back, it must be more than 50 years. Wow. So I played, I had this Iranian sitar with me, you know, even when I was in jail, I had it with me.
Amazing.
Yeah. And there were, you know, this is like the border of Afghanistan, and about maybe 50% of the population of the jail were Afghan smugglers. And they were doing music all the time, you know, they were singing every evening. And they were also feeding us. I was there with 2 other guys from Austria. And in that jail, there wouldn't be any real food to eat. So you were supposed to be fed by people from outside, by your relatives or something. But this particular Afghan smuggler, he was like you know, he was amongst the smugglers, he was like a buzurg, you know, he was an elder, and he had his own cook in his cell. He had his cook, he had his musicians, he had his whole stuff, you know, and he was feeding us every night, and I learned a couple of songs from them. I was always keen to pick up songs from people, and I'm still singing these songs.
Do you remember, the song? Do you remember the song still?
Yes, of course. I have a very trained memory. I know hundreds of Dhrupads. I know about a couple of hundred Bob Dylan songs. And I know Afghani, Baluchi, Farsi, I know British Bhasha songs, you know. I mean, I have quite a repertory. So for instance, one song I'm writing about in my novel is a song which was, it's an Indian film song, which was at that time, everybody knew it, even in Pakistan or Afghanistan. And who was singing it? Who was the singer? Dilip Kumar. The text of the song goes, "Dost dost na raha, pyar pyar."
Yeah.
You know that song. So this was.
Do you want to sing us a line? Do you remember the tune? It's audio. This is the wonder of sound.
Actually, we have so much. I mean, at that point, I would rather propose. I hope to be in Kolkata next winter. I have this research fellowship, and I was supposed to be in India already last year, but now it was postponed to this year. And let me do a full concert in Calcutta, because if you really want to do music, you really have to set the mood,
Absolutely.
And my idea of a concert is not like a hall and you have thousands of people and everybody is very distant, but the situation where the music I appreciate really grows is if you're together with a few friends and you don't have a fixed time where you pick up the instrument and now you have to sing and people clap and again, but rather you talk to people, you have a cup of tea, you tell some stories, and then eventually you pick up the instrument and you introduce some of the songs which are really coming up at that time. So
that's a deal. Whenever you come to Kolkata.
Yes. And also there is a danger, once I start to sing, I don't want to stop anymore. My wife is always telling me, only do 3 songs. Stop after 3 songs and listen to what other people have to say. So that's, I think you can understand and excuse me for.
Well, that's an Indian thing. People will want to sing late into the night, when people gather, one song will lead to another. But to come back to Singers Die Twice, I mean, you have this great interest in music and instruments. Looking back, can you do you have a sense now, looking back, as to why Dhrupad music or the sound of the sarangi, an instrument not as well known as the sitar, spoke to you so much?
I mean, I've been trying to answer your question in Singers Die Twice. Singers Die Twice actually is a quotation from a dream I had. And as I said, my fascination with sound and music goes back to the time when when I couldn't even speak yet. I didn't have any words, but the sounds are really touching me. And I was so fortunate that I still can remember the songs which my father was singing at my cradle. So this is something which is like a miracle, because music is something which is where you can communicate feelings. It's I much prefer to communicate with music than with words, because words are always very ambiguous. They're very cerebral and they can be easily misunderstood. You have to go into explanations and eventually you get a step further. But and that's good. But if you communicate sounds and feelings, this is a much clearer kind of communication, because a feeling, if I hear somebody sing, I can feel if he is singing from his heart or if he is just singing something which just repeating somebody else has taught to him.
But there's something very interesting you say, Peter, because that reminded me of a quote in the book where you say that voices always interest me if I can feel the human being behind the voice.
Exactly. Like at that time, at the time I was talking about, I was like, I was just completing school. I was 19, 20 years old. And at that time, so we are in 65, 66. And, the Beatles and the Stones were coming up. But I had been listening to John Lee Hooker and Big Bill Broonzy before, and all the great American blues singers had been coming to Germany, introduced by a guy who really made a point to bring the original blues over there. And so I was a total fan of Muddy Waters and Big Bill Broonzy and these people. And I considered like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles just as imitators, who had been exploiting something, something which they had learned from other people. That was my point of view at that time. And I was really totally disinterested in what we call classical music in Europe, because to me it sounded all this sounded very stale. But to come back to your question, I produced a film, or I made a film on music which for the European Cultural Channel, which was called The Road of the Troubadours. So I'm exploring the musical communication which goes on between like Morocco in the west and India in the east, and there is a long trail of, which is roughly, it was also the Silk Road as a trade road, but it was also a road of musical communication of instruments and musical ideas, makams, ragas, gypsies were going from the east to the west, and other people were going from west to the east. And that film opens with me sitting in a boat floating on the Jamna in Vrindavan, where I was running a Dhrupad school for some years in the 80s. And I'm sitting in that boat, and the filmmaker, she asked me, why did you come here? And I say, I came here because my culture has lost its memory. And so for me, coming to learn Dhrupad was a way to refresh my memory, because I was feeling that I was cut off from my own traditions, from my own European traditions, specifically from the culture of the troubadours of the 11th, 12th century at the time of the Crusades. And these cultures, these song traditions, which were in a way like heretic Sufi cults within Christianity, they were totally extinguished. Even the language was, the people were killed, and the language was extinguished. And so when people were talking about we have to save the indigenous cultures of the world, we have to help the Aboriginals in Australia and the American Indians, and all that. I was always feeling that my own culture had been taken away from me. I have to find a way going back to my own roots. And in Germany, this has some particular problems, because in Germany, what happened in the time of the Nazis and Hitler and so on, they were sort of occupying the memory. They were like stealing who are our ancestors? Well, the old Germans. You couldn't even mention that word anymore, because as soon as you were trying to come back to your own heritage, to the old German heritage, you know, to the old poetry, to the Nibelung story, and to the troubadour song, you would be accused of being a Nazi, you know, a backward-looking character. So it has some particular problems, and I've been more or less really all my life long, I've been working on recovering my cultural memory. And India has been particularly helpful for me, because the Dhrupad is really one of the, or probably the, or one of the most defined musical traditions. You know, the training you do as a Dhrupad musician is something which has been structured and done over many centuries. So it's a very good clearly defined tool to shape music and to remember music.
Because that actually, now something else that you write in the book makes even more sense, because you say in the book that in India, everything exists together at once. It's a palimpsest of sound, an old parchment on which new sounds have been inscribed since time immemorial. And so when you think of something like Dhrupad, which is so old, but now you're singing it in the 20th century, you have these layers of sound that have, so when somebody like a Ram Chattur Mallick is singing for you, he is carrying those layers of history within him, because he comes from these generations of Dhrupad singers. Did you feel that when you were learning from him, that generations?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's why I was, you know, when I met Ram Chattur Mallick, he was like above, he was over 80 already, and I was less than 30 years old. So he was an old man, and he had already suffered some strokes. Half his tongue was paralyzed. and he, you know, he was like handicapped in a way, but his musical spirit was so strong that he was totally confident about being able to express himself, and he had a fantastic memory of thousands and thousands of Dhrupad compositions, more than everybody living today has, I think. And so when I met him, finally I decided that I should really spend time with him, because I was sure I would never again meet a person who has this kind of broad spirit and knowledge. And you know, he was like a gypsy king. You know, he was really an authority. But contemporary India at that time had almost forgotten about him. So then I spent a lot of time with him in Darbhanga, in his house, and also traveling with him. You know, he was like constantly traveling. He was really like a gypsy, you know, and like Indian musicians travel a lot. And all musicians travel a lot. And then all my life I've been I've been traveling to many countries, and I've been always in conversation or contacting or learning from musicians, you know. And in Africa, in Mali, in Ethiopia, in Turkey, in Morocco, or wherever. And there is a fellowship between musicians, you know, because they have a trained listening, they know how to listen to people. You can easily make contact with musicians because they are aware of where you're, what's your aim, where you're coming from, what you're looking for. I mean, not everybody, of course. There are also, like in any trade, in any,
Right.
there are people who are superficial, or there are people who are like very keen on their own promotion.
Right.
But music is it's a very good tool. So wherever I was, I mean, any country of the world, I was always feeling at home because I was always with musicians.
And when you were working with, you talk about this wonderful book that Ram Chatur Malik had in this suit trunk under his bed, which is all these Dhrupad's songs.
The songs, yes.
Yeah. So what happened to that book finally after he died? Do you know?
I think you know, I'm giving the story of that book. You know, actually, he wanted to give it to me because he was. I think I'm telling the story that you know, I was a foreigner. Of course, I was a foreigner intruding into Bihar. You know, I hang out in Bihar, where never any ethnomusicologist had been hanging out in Bihar. You know, it was, nobody wanted to go there. It was supposed to be very dangerous, all the bandits and all that. So I was there. And so because of him, because of the Mallick family, and so he saw my interest and he wanted to give that book to me. And eventually I photographed the whole book. I didn't want to take it away, but he was accused by some of the figures in the cultural scene that how can you give that manuscript to a foreigner, you know, after all, that's not an Indian and all that. And so he said, I think I'm quoting him in the book, and he told them, look, if I give this book to you, it will be eaten by the ants. And if I give it to Peter, it will live on. and at the moment, I think his other disciple, Avena Ryan Malik, who lives, I think, in Delhi. He probably has this book, and I'm trusting that he's keeping it safe. But the thing is, it's not just about a book. You know, the book doesn't have any meaning if you don't have it in your head.
Right.
You know, it's not a book is just an object. And if you can learn something in India, is that music makes only sense if you have it in you. You know, you cannot read it from a you know, you cannot read it from a notation. You know, you really have to have it within you. So yeah, the book, I think it's there. And but the book is really not the main thing. It's as many of the compositions as are remembered, that much the tradition lives on. And at the moment, I think the surviving members of the Mallick family, they are thriving. You know, Dhrupad is alive and well all over, everywhere, and there are so many branches of this family. Some are still in Darbhanga, some are in Patna, some are in Allahabad or Vrindavan, and so on. And there is, I've seen 5 generations of musicians in that family in front of my eyes, and they are, you know, there is music born freshly every day within the minds of these people. So it's for me, it's a total joy. At the time when I was coming to India, there was the impression that this is a dying art and it's almost extinct. And at that time, that was the general impression. But what I can say now is that no, it's very much alive, and it's it's thriving, and it's also, it's not just about Dhrupad, you know. It's not Dhrupad is a special case, but there are so many different traditions, and there are other different other schools in India. You know, Imrat Khan in Kolkata. He used to be my buddy, you know. We were very good friends. He had been living in Germany in the 70s with his family. We brought him to Berlin on a residency. And since then, I've been seeing him virtually like every year. I used to go to Kolkata, especially to see him every winter and spend some time with him. And so I just the other night, I listened to a whole concert which he had played at the time, and I must say, this is really magic, you know. It's really amazing how human beings can do something like that. And you hear it, and it's almost like a dream. And when it's over, you tend to forget it. You remember that something special has happened, but you only realize when you go back to it, and the thing is really in front of you, or is in your mind, in your soul again, that you can fathom the depth of the thing, you know.
Which leads me to this question, Peter. When you are writing about, well, when you write about the effect music has on people, and this book is so interestingly written, because in one level, it's a story of an actual physical journeys that you're trying to do, to go from Delhi to the funeral that is going to happen in Amta through flood. So there's a journey. But then there's another journey that is happening where you're trying to actually journey into the heart of music and absorb that tradition. But when you then try to put it into words, and A, you're writing about music, and B, you're writing about a musical tradition that is very different from what your readers in German or even in English might be used to. What was the challenge for you as a writer?
It's, you know, now, I mean, if you like, if I'm writing or anybody else is writing, it's a question. It's really about telling stories, you know. And this is a totally different ball game than doing music. So you have to think about how you make a story interesting. And as you said, Singers Die Twice is a journey. And in the journey, in the course of that journey, which is, I'm describing how I'm trying to get to the place where the last rites of my old guru, Pandit Vido Mallick, is happening in Amta. It's a very adventurous journey, and inside in the journey, I'm setting in my memories of how I came there, how I met him, what we did together, and the whole book is like a thank you to him. You know, it's a memory. And in the book I'm writing now, because that has become a novel, and it has more different layers. It has not just these two layers. I found the solution in having a turtle, a tortoise, a kachua, you know, tell the story, and the chapters of the stories are set on the back of the turtle. So each, you know, a turtle has segments on the back, and each segment or each shield of the turtle has a different story, and the stories all interact and relate to each other. And there are several levels of you know, on that turtle back. And so I'm telling this becomes a more complex structure, and you can also read it several ways. You can read it just along one side of the shield, or you can go in between the you know, you can cross, you can I mean, approach it in different ways. And I mean, I'm you know, I'm a music teacher also. I'm teaching singing since many years, and I have pupils, and I see that it's not really that you can explain to people how to listen to music. It's there is a certain group of people who have a natural talent of being able to imbibe sounds. There are people also in Germany, if you play some Indian raga for them, they understand it immediately. They totally are, in a second they are in the picture, they know what it's about. And there are other people to whom you have explained that, and who have inhibitions or who have a fear to turn themselves over into this abyss of sounds. And so you have to find a way, it's like
you have to hold their hand, and you have to hold their hand a little bit before they jump.
It's like you're teaching somebody how to swim. Yes. How to swim in an oceans of sounds. And so everybody is different, it's not that everybody can go by the same method. So it's
no, I understand what you're saying, because at some level you have to, just like swimming is a very good analogy, because you have to let go, and at some level then you have to overcome that fear and inhibition. But Peter, as I was talking to you, given your love for being a street musician, that is so much, that gypsy feeling so much in your thing, and I see all the musical instruments around you right now as we speak. And I think in some ways air travel has made, at least before COVID, made the world a much smaller place than when you first went to Pakistan and India. It's probably easier to get to places like Darbhanga now than it was then, when you were riding on the rooftops of buses and things like that.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
You think it's still as difficult to get there?
I don't think the world has become smaller. The world actually has like, if you get on a plane and you fly to Delhi, and you step out of the airport in Delhi, and you try to understand what's going on around you, you have actually no clue. If you would travel over land, and you would know what's in between. That is what makes you understand, where you are. And so it's a fallacy, it's not, it doesn't make it more easy. It doesn't make it more easy to get to Darbhanga. It's easier, like, if you really take the whole way, and if you take the whole course, and if you have to prepare yourself. And this is air travel is leaving you clueless. You have to. It takes a couple of months till you have picked up what's happening around you.
But it is also becoming increasingly difficult in our world to do that kind of travel that you're talking about, where you take that much time and you walk, you go by land to places. I mean, in India right now, they won't even give you a visa for that length of time anymore. I mean, it seems like it's becoming a much harder to be a world citizen in this world.
Isn't that a very bad sign about the state of affairs? This is a topic we could talk about
for a long time.
For a long time. I'm not as I'm not as hopeless. I don't think the situation is as hopeless as you have painted it now. I think there are many, many ways to go through over borders and to go, you know, to skip things. But that's a really long subject. I think we are already approaching the end of our conversation, and we haven't even really started it yet.
That is, well, that's the truth of all journeys, right? That you know, you at the end of the journey, you're really in the beginning of another one. But you know, yes, we are approaching the end. But let me just ask you then, that for you, the end, having in terms of this book, In Singers Die Twice, because you write about these people, the gurus that you learn music from, Ram Chatur Malik, Pandit Vidur Malik, and as you say, it's a thank you to the gurus. What did, coming from Germany, from that tradition, what did you learn about what it means to have a guru? Because that is something that is changing even now in India itself.
I don't. I think that's very easy. You know, if you are really interested in an art, you know, if you try to express yourself, you know, if you try to dig out, you know, what's inside, and you come across people who have done that before you, you naturally you will try to take hints from them, you know, and so and this kind of person, this kind of tradition in India, in parts, it's still existing. Of course, there are also phony gurus, and you know, I mean, we don't have to talk about that. But my to compare it to Germany, you know, the thing is that during the Nazi rule in Germany, you know, they were really trying to extinguish everything which was spiritual, fanciful, which was creative, you know. So all the people who had, all the gurus which had existed in the generations before me, they were either killed or they had left Germany and gone to other parts of the world. So I was growing up on a very barren field, you know. It was a very stony field. And so we were longing for people of an elder generation who could give us, or who I was doing that, who could give me some hints of you know, how to really pick up an art form. And so when I met these people, you know, I've also been studying with these with the Tagore brothers and other people, and also with other musicians from other cultures. So it for me, it seems to be just very natural, you know, to respect and to try to get something from an elder person. And in this case, it was so beautiful because I felt like I was accepted in the family. I was becoming a part of the family. So this means much more than just learning an art form, right?
Sorry,
I can't hear you.
Yeah, my sound was muted, but okay. In fact, when I talked about it, we're out of time. I was going to say, when I talked about these journeys you made, one of the journeys is also in the journey of, you know, going to, because it ends with this wonderful toast with Vidur's son is making after he died. And he says, we have become the gurus now. From now on, we must find the way ourselves. There's no one to show it to us, but it allows you to show the way. Peter Pannke, before I let you go, one quick thing. This is just a silly question, but you know, and the book you mentioned that only 6 ragas have special powers. Megh causes rain, Bhairav fire, Malkos, Hindol the breeze,
Yes.
tree, and Deepak. Let me just ask you, these are the ragas with the special powers, but for you, which raga is your special favorite?
I couldn't name any special rag. You know, there are. It's that question is really impossible.
You can't choose. You can't choose it.
No, you can't choose. That's not fair. Like you know, there's not that you want to eat one dish all the time. You know, if you do that, it will lose the taste. So it's a living thing. You know, ragas are also like living beings, and and for some time you are totally thrilled with a special taste, and you just want to follow that. But then the next day, you something else is coming up. You know, and also India is very, you know, one very outstanding point of in Indian music is that you are looking to the relationship between the position of the sun and the sound, which means like the timings of the day, and that's a very, very interesting idea. So you would like even in the course of one day, you wouldn't stay with just one melody. It's everything is changing all the time. So you cannot, you know, if you try to cling to one time of the day, it doesn't make any sense, you know.
As they say, the only constant is change.
Yes.
So we are now actually out of time. But Peter Pannke, when you come to Kolkata, we will hold you to that promise of a concert, and we will we will listen to them. We will have conversation and music.
I sing Dos Naraha.
You will sing those Naraha and many other songs, I hope. We will get a taste of some of these instruments that you brought. So let me thank you for spending this wonderful hour with us, and let me hand this over to Partha Chattopadhyay at the
Sure.
I absolutely agree to Sandip. Definitely, probably next year when Peter come to Kolkata, we will definitely have such a concert.
Lovely.
So thank you so much, Peter, dear Peter, and of course, Sandip, for such a captivating, such a fascinating hour of conversation. And I believe our listeners have also enjoyed a lot and have the same feeling like I have. I wish I could listen to you for much longer, dear Peter. Our sincere thanks to, of course, our sincere thanks to all the listeners for being with us. And we hope you have really enjoyed this wonderful hour. And also look forward to have you back again on our next sessions, which will be announced on our website soon. In the meantime, I would like to invite you all to listen to the readings of some excerpts from the book, Singers Die Twice, originally in German by Peter Pannke, and of course in English by Naveen Kishore. So thank you so much. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.